Hi, I'm Catherine Kirridge. I'm a partner in Osborne Clarke's competition team, and today I'm joined by our head of competition, Simon Neal, to talk about the UK's new Digital Markets Competition and Consumer Bill. We're doing a short series of these videos to deep dive into some of the aspects of the bill and the key areas to watch for as it goes through Parliament. Today, Simon, we're going to be talking about mergers, and some of the key focus around mergers has been on those transactions by the biggest companies that are going to be designated as having strategic market status.
Yeah.
And is it right that there are some big changes coming around that?
Yeah, absolutely, Catherine. It's correct. And partly this is being driven by the CMA. They've been criticised for not having picked up certain acquisitions by the big tech companies, which perhaps they should have done. And that's partly, it's not always the CMA's fault. It's these are incremental investments in smaller companies perhaps, which are very difficult for the CMA to be able to detect. And what this is doing, and it really is quite a material change, is requiring the SMS designated firms to report transactions before they enter into them, so the CMA can decide whether or not it actually wants to look at them. And the interesting thing is here, the threshold starts really at a very low level. So it's so long as there's a 15% sort of acquisition of voting rights, that's enough, provided the consideration value is more than 25 million.
Yeah.
And then 15%, it'll capture 25%, it'll capture 50%. So incremental investments in the same firm can still be caught.
Yeah.
And this is really quite a material change for the big tech firms.
Yeah. And does that mean that we're now going to have a mandatory regime for those companies?
For that, yes, in effect, it is a mandatory regime,
Yeah.
and it's a mandatory reporting requirement. So very much, if they implement without having told the CMA, they would be fined.
Yeah.
But otherwise, there are changes coming down the road for the rest of the merger regime, which is still very much supporting the voluntary nature of that, which the CMA seems wedded to.
Yeah. And even in those biggest SMS mergers, the CMA won't have to open investigations, so we may see them be notified but not proceed with them. So it's more reporting rather than a kind of mandatory
Absolutely.
review.
I think the CMA has 5 days within which to decide whether it wants to look at that or not.
Yeah.
But the key thing is the CMA is now getting information up front, and that's the big change.
Yeah. And what about for other types of mergers? Are there changes more broadly, or is this really about SMS companies?
There is one big change, I think, which we all need to be aware of, and that's around killer acquisitions.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of criticism that the CMA is unable to assert jurisdiction over transactions which perhaps involve a big company acquiring a small company that really is a nascent competitor, doesn't yet have any really material presence in the market. And how do we adjust the regime for the CMA to capture that? What they've decided to do is to make a rule where one party, so long as it has more than a third of a market within the UK and has more than 350 million revenue in the UK, then any transaction it makes, any acquisition it makes, can potentially be reviewed by the CMA. And that in effect means that any entity with a strong position is going to have to be thinking about the CMA right from the get-go.
Yeah. But it still doesn't sound like more clarity necessarily.
This helps the CMA and doesn't really help business with clarity or legal certainty.
Yeah. And it's certainly one of the things that we find is that the kind of uncertainty of the voluntary regime in the UK does cause lots of issues for companies thinking about progressing to transactions. Are there changes to other thresholds as well if it's not a killer acquisition?
Well, there are, but they're not hugely material. They're going to change the £70 million turnover threshold up to 100 million. Probably not going to make a lot of difference in practice. They're leaving the 25% share of supply, the overlap threshold, that remains the same. But they are, in a nod to small markets, they're saying even where the share of supply test is satisfied, if none of the parties to the transaction have more than 10 million turnover in the UK, then it's deemed to be not satisfied. So in effect, it's a safe harbour for very small transactions in the UK.
Yeah. So I think overall probably the key message for everyone looking at corporate transactions is that particularly those killer acquisition type deals, if you're buying challenger companies, not just in the tech sector, then we do need to be thinking even more than ever about the CMA and really fundamentally no greater clarity, particularly around when the CMA might intervene. I think that's
I'd agree with
right.
that.
So definitely an area to keep an eye on. We've got more of these videos coming out about the bill and lots of content on oc.com as that bill goes through Parliament. So please watch this space. Thank you.